Exclusive contract novel from Feilu Novel Network. Comprehensive manga. Becoming a god starts from Jiehuluoqixi Traverse through a dangerous world of unemployment, and transform from an adult to a baby, facing the crisis of freezing to death on the roadside. Suno just felt like he had fallen out of blood mold. Just as he was about to cross the underworld again, he unexpectedly awakened the proficiency system. Easily acquire any skill, as long as the liver proficiency is sufficient, the skill can evolve. Coincidentally, Lilia, who was preparing to join Paul's family, saved Suno.So, an unparalleled genius who amazed the whole world, walked away from the Graylat family. Paul. Have you ever seen a 3-year-old swordsman? Rudius. I am the water saint at the age of 5, but my boss is the water emperor at the same age. Luo Qixi. Although I am a master disciple. Can I still get married? Sylphy. I already liked you the day I saw you since I was young. Alice. Suno. Marry me. Dragon God. Surprisingly, such a terrifying powerhouse has emerged in this era. Human God. Don't come over. Feilu Novel Network reminds you that this novel and its characters are purely fictional. If there are any similarities, they are purely coincidental and should not be imitated. 1. Lilia and Baby, Proficiency System. You are listening at novelfull.audio. On the road leading to the village of Buena in the territory of Fatoya. In the cold and freezing weather, a baby landed on one side of a dirt road, shivering and trembling. He was completely naked, without any clothes to wrap around, and there was no heating around him. What's even more magical is that despite being tormented by such a cold, the baby is completely crying, just staring at the sky with inexplicable and profound eyes. The baby Suno, who was about to freeze to death in the cold winter, was already desperate for this damn world. Others have traveled under the protection of the heavenly Buddha, and how to put oneself on it is to transform the body into a baby, facing the desperate situation of being about to be reincarnated as soon as they have traveled. The traveler Suno wanted to sigh heavily, but due to his young age, cold and tired body, he didn't have the strength to do it. Tired, destroyed. System, is there any way to save me? Suno asked in his heart. Report to the host, this system is called the liver experience system. Its function is to enable the host to quickly learn any skill and use the liver experience function to make the skill evolve infinitely. Don't force me to be lazy. What's the point of saying these things? I'm asking you, is there any way I can survive? I'm almost dead. Well, because the host is in an immobile state and there are no skills to learn. So you're useless. As the host gradually became irritable, the sound of the system became weaker and weaker, until later on, Suno refused to come out no matter what he called. What's going on? Who said that traveling to another world is a beautiful thing? Suno really wants to give himself a big fight 3 minutes ago, because he believed in the deceitful plot of online novels and was eagerly anticipating the sudden crossing of this matter. The journey is bleak, the world is dangerous, and he wants to go home. But as soon as he woke up, he suddenly arrived at this place and couldn't find a way back. Woo 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 woo. Who can help? There's a baby here who's freezing to death. Because I am still a baby, I naturally cannot speak. Even if I can speak, it is impossible to speak the language of this world. Because this is a different world. Creak, creak. The sound of the carriage pressing over the snow. If someone stood next to Suno and opened their perspective to look back, they could see a simple carriage slowly approaching from behind on a narrow path covered in thin snow. The old coachman waving his whip in front, sitting in the shelter made of only coarse old cloth, was a young woman. The brown long hair is fixed at the back with hair clips, while the rest naturally spills over the shoulders, wearing a very civilian-style long skirt. Under the white eyes, there are a pair of eyes that give people a serious feeling. Lilia, a former palace maid who had just been fired from the palace and came to the countryside to seek employment, also noticed the baby who didn't cry or make a fuss. The eyebrows furrowed slightly. What a pitiful child, abandoned from birth. Ahead, the coachman moaned and sighed with emotion. The world is really dangerous. Mr. Coachman, can you bear to watch the child die? Lilia asked, and if the coachman was willing to take action, she wouldn't have to worry. Due to a mistake made in the royal family, Lilia has just found a commission to take care of a baby in the city, and she is currently in a state of being too busy to attend an interview. Hehe, all my money has been used in the tavern, but I don't have any extra money to raise children. The coachman drove the horse forward, only giving it a sidelong glance. And I don't have any experience raising children either. If this child follows the old man, it will only become money for paying the bill. Ah! This person is an incurable scoundrel. Lilia thought of it and lightly jumped off the carriage, running towards the direction of the baby. Hey! Even seemingly harmless babies on the roadside may be the source of disaster, little girl. I know, Lilia said without looking back, gently picking up the baby that was frozen stiff in the cold wind. Lilia, who had just escaped from a court battle, knew better than anyone the risks and troubles that even saving a baby could bring her. She knew the correct approach was to turn a blind eye like a coachman. But it's impossible for her to watch this child freeze to death. In such a contradictory mood, Lilia picked up the baby, pulled open her shirt, and tightly embraced him in her arms. In front of her was a face that could be described as very beautiful. The young woman tightly embraced herself in arms that could be described as majestic, so Suno felt waves of warmth. The sense of peace that had finally been saved filled his soul, and the woman who was holding him tightly in his heart at this moment was a shining and great existence even more than an angel. At the same time, because of the woman's familiar face, he also understood where the world he had traveled to was. It's actually a world of jobless reincarnation. The person holding oneself is none other than Lilia, the second mother of the male protagonist Rudius. The carriage with an extra baby continued to walk on the path. Suno, held in Lilia's arms, was in a daze of peace of mind. Is it because the body is too small and lacks energy? Or is it because I was lying on the ground and hit by the cold wind before? In short, at this moment of calmness, Suno has been fighting against the drowsiness in his mind. Always pay attention to the wind and grass nearby, and of course, Lilia pays special attention to the conversation with the coachman, but unfortunately she can't understand. Ding, due to the host's extra focus on learning, congratulations to the host for obtaining the Human Common Language skill. Human Common Language skill, limited to the world of jobless reincarnation. Mastering this skill proficiently can effectively communicate with humans. Skill Proficiency LV 1.0 out of 100. The system that disappeared for a while reappeared. At the same time, a wave of information emerged in Suno's mind. Because I just listened attentively to Lilia and the coachman talking, and surprisingly learned the first skill. Obtaining the first skill so easily is a bit impressive in this system. After changing his mind about the proficiency system, Suno shifted his focus to how to obtain skill proficiency. Being able to quickly understand people in this world can greatly enhance their hope of survival, and Suno is quite eager to upgrade this skill. Fortunately, obtaining proficiency in the operation is not difficult, just listen quietly as before. Suno adjusted his posture slightly in the warm embrace, fully eager to understand what Lilia and the coachman were chatting about. Proficiency +1, unconsciously, proficiency rapidly increased, and soon human language skills reached 100 proficiency levels, becoming like this. Human Common Language skill, limited to the world of jobless reincarnation. Mastering this skill proficiently can effectively communicate with humans. Skill Proficiency LV 2.0 out of 1000. As a benefit of the upgrade, it is different from before when only a slight sense of meaning could be felt. Now Suno can understand Lilia's meaning roughly. As time passed, the carriage came to a stop. Qingming outing and happy reading. Charge 100 and get 500 VIP coupons. Immediate recharge, activity period. April 4th to April 6th. 2. Friendly Graylat family. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Little girl, the village of Buena is ahead. Thank you very much. Lilia finished paying and walked towards the front with the baby in her arms. Surrounded by a field frozen by wind and frost, simple houses scattered around. In this cold winter, even at noon, there were no fresh people smoking, and without anyone asking for directions, Lilia could only follow the instructions on the power of attorney and search for each one in the village. Finally, I saw a house that was much taller and more luxurious than the other houses. The Graylat family. Lilia looked at the house with complex eyes, hesitated for a long time at the door, and finally knocked on the yard door. Dong dong dong. Here we go. A very energetic man's voice came from inside. Quickly, the door opened. What appeared was a burly man with a long brown hair tied into a shoulder-hanging braid. Paul Graylat, the employer who released a job to hire maids to take care of babies in the city due to his wife giving birth to a boy. The man with a sunny and handsome smile showed a surprised expression when he saw Lilia. Is that you? Long time no see, Mr. Paul. Suno was dozing off while listening to the two of them start chatting and arguing. As for the general content of their conversation, it was roughly that Lilia wanted to get the commission, but Paul was unwilling and kept shifting the blame. In the end, when Lilia used her handle skill, Paul's face changed drastically. Paul reluctantly discussed with his wife, Denise, who was lying in bed, and learned that she had worked in the court before, which made Denise very happy. So, Lilia officially became the maid of the Graylat family. By the way, Lilia, is this your child? Paul looked at the baby in Lilia's arms and asked curiously. No, I just picked it up from the roadside. Lilia said calmly. Is that so? Paul was skeptical. If it's picked up, don't you need to find the child's parents? They will also worry, right? Lilia thought back to the scene when she discovered the child, feeling that there was no need for such worry. No need, this is a child that no one wants. Yes. Nestled in Lilia's warm embrace, Suno quietly listened to their conversation. Proficiency +1, Proficiency +1, the universal human language skills in this world have unknowingly reached level 3. Human common language skill, limited to the world of jobless reincarnation. Mastering this skill proficiently can effectively communicate with humans. Skill Proficiency LV 3.0/10,000. After reaching level 3, Suno can basically understand all the conversations between Lilia and Paul. It can be said that the language barrier has completely disappeared, and the discipline of survival has greatly increased. The heart that had been hanging since becoming a helpless baby finally relaxed a bit. After understanding the language, one learns how to speak. Because they are still infants with limited mobility, organs such as the vocal cords have not fully developed. It seems that speaking will take some time. However, is the improvement in skill proficiency actually decimal? The proficiency required for each upgrade is 10 times higher than before. What's the use of continuing to improve language skills when you can understand people in this world at level 2? Where is the limit of level? When thinking about such a question, Suno was already lying in the crib at Graylat's house. Next to him, there is also a crib, inside which is the newborn child of the homeowner Paul. Rudius Graylat. Two babies from different worlds looked straight at the ceiling, neither crying nor making noise. A week passed in the blink of an eye. It's really strange. The maid Lilia's work went smoothly, whether it was cleaning the house or taking care of the baby, it was something she had been used to doing for a long time, so she was able to do it with ease. Both Paul and Sannies were very satisfied, feeling that with such a salary, they could find such an excellent job as a maid. However, only Lilia knew about the anomalies in her work. The two babies at home are unusually quiet. Paul's son Rudius, along with the wild child he picked up, was too abnormal compared to a normal baby. Firstly, babies often cry at night, which almost never happens to either of them. When she is hungry, she will also proactively remind Lilia, which is completely different from ordinary babies. Normally, there is no need to cuddle, and most of the time there will be no problems when placed in the crib. This relaxed parenting situation makes novice Sannies and Paul very happy. However, for Lilia, who has taken care of many difficult babies, this is a somewhat world-breaking event. And the hostess, Thanis, who had already become familiar with Lilia, comforted the maid so much. You see, there are all kinds of geniuses in this world, right? Geniuses in magic and swordsmanship, perhaps these two children are those born geniuses. Lilia is skeptical about such statements. Novice mothers always love to imagine their children as the best in the world, especially during their most malleable infancy. Rational Lilia knew that this was just the simplest love for her son. As time goes by, most mothers will be disappointed to find that their children are just one of the most ordinary people. Unable to move much, another month and a half passed in the blink of an eye. On the way, I experienced Rudy and Suno's birthday celebration, which was actually just inviting people from the village to come over and have a meal. Because Paul served as a knight in the village of Buena, his popularity was quite good, and many people came. Then came the naming event of Suno, who performed at the MVP level, constantly spitting out the words "su" and "no" with the strength of sucking milk. Finally, 3 adults who freely named themselves were allowed to freeze their names on the character Suno. Because there are no parents, there is naturally no surname to follow, so it is just a simple Suno. This may seem very tragic to Paul and others, but it happens to be just right for Suno. It's not bad that I used the same name for 2 lifetimes. Whether it was eating or sleeping, there was someone to take care of. After arriving at Graylat's house, Suno basically dressed and stretched out his hand, opened his mouth for food, and only slept. But because he is still a baby, no matter what he thinks, it is a helpless thing. Now everything he does is under the nominal control of his foster mother, Lilia. When there is nothing else to do, Suno will also think about collecting information and considering the next action guidelines. After meeting Lilia, Paul, Sanus, and Rudius, it can be confirmed that this is a good world for jobless reincarnation. The timeline, as seen from the baby Rudy lying next to him sleeping soundly, should be the beginning of the timeline. According to the original plot, the following is the story of apprentice Loki saving Sylphy, followed by Alice in the family classroom plot initiated by Rudy to make money, and the subsequent major disaster. Diversion event. On the following day, probably after Rudy demonstrated his magical abilities, Paul will release the task for the home classroom, and Loki will arrive. That is to say, as long as I stay with the Graylat family, I will definitely see Loki. Qingming outing and happy reading. Charge 100 and get 500 VIP coupons. Immediate recharge, activity period. April 4th to April 6th. Free, Rudius. Why are you so good, both babies? You are listening at novelfull.audio. The question is what attitude should be taken towards her. For this older but younger demon tribe, Suno naturally likes her attitude. If possible, he also really wants to have it. Not only Loki, but also Sylphy and Alice. Since they have come to this world, they just don't do anything and watch these 3 people become someone else's wives. It was as uncomfortable as presenting him with the world's first green hat award on site. Moreover, at the end of the day, it is still the time when all fate has not yet unfolded. As long as one performs well in the upcoming events, the future they have achieved will be the future that should have appeared. The true future. These 3 people originally had their own endings, and Rudy's arrival had already changed their future. So, now it's up to him to create this future. But it's difficult for humans and gods to handle it. Suno lay in the crib, looking at the bare ceiling, frowning at the difficult name. In the original storyline, the three of Loki and Rudi's child also had the mission of killing the gods in the future. The three characters of Luo Qixi, also known as the parents of the brave in traditional games. Once they become their wives, the future will change, and whether they and their children have the power to defeat humans and gods will also be questioned. In this way, perhaps they can get rid of the future that is being targeted by humans and gods. But who should overthrow humans and gods? The human god, also known as the ultimate boss of this world, is a terrifying presence that can dominate the ceiling of world power. Many of the 7 major powers are responsible for their actions. A demon skilled in bewitching people in dreams. If possible, Suno doesn't really want to be his enemy. Of course, since we are targeting Loki, Sylphy, and Alice, and now we are under the same roof as Rudi, dealing with humans and gods may only be a matter of time. It is also necessary to be prepared to defeat the opponent once they turn against them. Possible enemies are divine beings, but Suno is not an ordinary baby either. As a traveler, he possesses his own cheats and proficiency system. He can quickly and proficiently master various skills, and his ability evolution is unlimited. With enough time, this kind of self should be able to become stronger than humans and gods, right? Winter has passed, spring has arrived, the cold ice has melted, the earth has revived, and the warm spring breeze has blown through the village of Buena. The villagers who are hiding in their houses to avoid the cold in this winter have also started to go out frequently during the warm spring season when flowers are blooming. Sow seeds in the fields, wash clothes in groups by the river, and visit the neighbors in the afternoon when there is nothing to do. And in the passage of time, Suno's travel time also came to 6 months. While Rudius could only spend most of his time lying in the crib next to him, Suno was already able to walk on the ground. Proficiency +1, just run on the wooden floor and your proficiency will naturally increase. And this is also a new skill that Suno has acquired before. Walking, LV3. 4280/10,000 in LV1, the effect was very ordinary, it just made Suno walk more proficiently on the ground. By the time we reached LV2, Suno's speed could already be described as fast. But now the LV3 has the stability and speed of an adult, which is completely different from Rudi who can only barely walk a few steps down. This surprised the 3 adults of the Graylat family. This skill is also evolving quickly. Let's work harder recently. Suno, dressed in baby clothes, followed Lilia back and forth, and occasionally even helped her with some small tasks, which made the hard-working maid feel very strange. Young Master Rudi, who didn't cry much originally, was already surprising enough. The child he adopted was even more sensible and strict, and Lilia couldn't find any faults. Lilia turned her head and glanced at the toddler following her, feeling that the decision to adopt the child was indeed not wrong. Gigi. Suddenly, a sparrow fell from the window of the room. Lilia saw the child walking over, so the sparrow called out softly, as if confiding something to him. On the land of blooming spring flowers, sparrows swaying their heads and chattering by a tall window, and babies listening with their necks tilted up. This childlike scene, where one person and one bird coexist harmoniously, even evokes a strange idea in Lilia's heart. Is it difficult for this child to understand the language of birds? No, how could a baby do something like this that he had never heard of before? Lilia suppressed this crazy idea. Suno can indeed understand bird language. The correct statement is that due to human language skills reaching level 3, skills have evolved. Becoming able to use language to make small animals obey their commands. Weak dominance, LV1, 15380/1000000. The ability to use language to control animals and plants evolved from human language skills. After testing, the time limit is 10 minutes after the command is issued. As for the types of life that can be controlled, they are as diverse as described. Thumb-sized mosquitoes, birds, and trees in the yard can easily command their movements. As for consumption, it is completely non-existent. There is no consumption of magic or physical energy. The only limitation may be that there are only a maximum of 3 animals and plants that can be controlled at once. Can you obtain an evolution every time a skill reaches a level 3 breakthrough? This seems to be a rule. As a result, in the world of swords and magic, I didn't become a magician or swordsman first, but instead became a druid first. Looking at the birds flying away, Suno was speechless. Rudius Grest, the eldest son of Paul, who had been eagerly anticipated by his entire family. Although I am still a baby now, I used to be in another world at the age of nearly 30, a dead fat house addicted to gal games and never worked for a day. A desperate and hopeless person who once did something like hiding at home on the day of their parents' funeral, watching photos of Loki in gal games and flying a plane. But since I have been reincarnated into a baby, my past name and unpleasant experience no longer matter. What's important is now. It has been more than half a year since he was hit by a truck and turned into a baby. Although the baby Rudius still doesn't understand language very well, he has been trying to observe this world. From his usual words, actions, and expressions, it can be seen that he is the eldest son of this family. The man with brown hair, who is a bit indecent, is his own father, while the brown-haired beauty with a gentle and elegant attitude is his own mother. There is also a very capable maid at home who takes care of the daily chores. And a baby who, like herself, seems to be a maid's child. Another baby that makes Rudy feel strange but should be living together. In just over half a year of being unable to move during his reincarnation experience, the other person, who was also a baby, caused a great shock to Rudy. Qingming outing and happy reading. Charge 100 and get 500 VIP coupons. Immediate recharge, activity period. April 4th to April 6th. 4. Suno's swordsmanship talent, incredibly shocking Paul. You are listening at novel.full.audio. It doesn't cry or cause trouble for adults, it can be said to be a perfect baby. Can he walk on the ground when he can only lie down? Rudy even witnessed the terrifying scene of that guy talking to bugs and asking them to help him move things. All these extraordinary events caused Rudy's brain to crash for a long time, but recently he finally figured everything out. Firstly, from the perspective of clothing and the ability to use superpowers, the place he is in should not be the same as before. Although the specific situation outside is not yet clear, it is very different from the previous life. Secondly, the baby companion who has been lying in the same room with oneself can basically be concluded to be a genius-level figure in this world and a future great figure. If I could establish a good relationship with such a genius, my life would surely be much easier, wouldn't it? As long as you flatter this person well, you won't be able to easily lead a life without lacking money and beauty. It's okay, I'm still a baby now, and there's still plenty of time and opportunities. On this day, baby Rudius made the decision to hold on to the thighs of the cohabiting baby tightly. Half a year has passed in the blink of an eye. On this morning, with clear skies spanning thousands of miles, the courtyard of the Graylat family was filled with an incredibly rare scene. Come on, take the call. Yes. Uncle Paul. Paul made an attacking posture with a wooden sword, while his opponent was a 1-year-old child who was much smaller than his burly physique. Although it was still small, it was already running and walking nimbly. Although the voice of speaking was still very milky, the words spoken were particularly clear. At such a young age, Suno was able to achieve what he is now, which really surprised Paul, Sanis, and Lilia. Everyone who watched this child grow up with their own eyes can see that this child is extraordinary. So, Paul, who was itching today, also made a proposal to teach Suno swordsmanship. I won't let you water just because you're a baby, give it my all. Yes, master. A very energetic and milky voice. Oh. It's very catchy. This is just a general way of life. Suno, holding a wooden sword, imitated Paul's style and put on an attacking posture. Ding, Congratulations to the host for obtaining the skill, Sword God Flow. Sword God Flow, LV1. 0 out of 100. It turns out that Paul's current posture is Sword God Flow. I just don't know what this skill is really useful for. Take the call. Paul held a wooden sword and sprinted towards this side at a speed that made Suno unable to react at all. Wow, it's so fast. Suno immediately wielded his wooden sword and swung it with all his strength towards the one that was already close to his head and larger than his own body. Pop. The small wooden sword in Suno's hand was thrown away a long distance and happened to fall in front of Senni's, who was holding Rudy to the side. Because Suno's seemingly decent blow just now shocked both the inexperienced mother and son. Haha. We won. Paul proudly raised his sword. Although there's still a long way to go, the blow just now was quite good for your age. Paul looked at Suno without hiding his admiration. I acknowledge your talent, just admit that you are my disciple. Yes, master. As an adult, Paul may not be very reliable, but as a swordsman, his strength is useless, and it would be good to become his disciple. Suno was somewhat surprised, and with agile steps, he picked up his wooden sword that had been thrown away. Take a sword-like posture and face Paul again. What, is there still a strong fighting spirit? Paul exclaimed in surprise. Let's forget about today. You can have a practical competition when you grow up in a few days. The difference in strength between you and me now is too great, do you understand? Suno still copied his milky voice and answered firmly. Please teach me. There's nothing we can do. Don't cry when you get hurt from being beaten. Paul looked at the skeptical little one on the other side with a helpless expression on his face, but his body became excited and he put on an attacking posture like hunting. As a swordsman, you need to have the courage to draw your sword even in the face of invincible opponents, and you have done a great job in this regard. Really, actually getting serious with a baby. Sanni's, who was watching from the side, rolled her eyes wide. Rudy, who was in her arms, also stared curiously at the scene, showing great interest in the battle between adults and babies. Surprisingly, using a sword. This world is truly extraordinary. Also, that guy is only 1 year old like himself, right? Can we fight with a sword now? What a monster. Upstairs, Lilia, who was wiping the window with a towel, also stopped her movements and watched the battle between her adopted child and Paul. And as Suno looked at Paul, who was in an attacking posture with a terrifying aura, ready to attack at any moment, he was already sweating profusely. Whether it's technology, height, physical fitness, or the difference between the babies Suno and Paul, it's all too big. Moreover, once he entered a state of combat, Paul completely lost his usual carefree demeanor and became very serious, exuding a terrifying aura throughout his body. This is probably the demonic energy that has been tempered through many battles of life and death. Although the opponent is so terrifying to his current self, Suno has not given up on his mini wooden sword. Proficiency +1, ding. Congratulations to the host, the skill, Sword God Flow, has been upgraded. Just after a brief battle with Paul, I easily gained a proficiency of 100. Practical experience is indeed the best way to make progress. Once I attack, the outcome will be determined. How about trying to take the initiative? After Paul finished speaking, the next second he saw the little man across from him jump up and his wooden sword strike towards his head. Not only is the posture standard, but the speed is also very fast. Can you actually achieve this level? It's not bad. Paul was somewhat surprised and raised his sword to block the attack. The small wooden sword did not give up and attacked again. The battle of one attack and one defense lasted until Suno's stamina was completely exhausted, and he could only lie on the ground and gasp for breath to end. I have made rapid progress in my skills, but my physical strength is completely inadequate. Paul walked over and looked down at Suno with a triumphant attitude. A man's body can't be so weak. Suno. Baby silent JPG, darling, is defeating a baby worth your happiness. Sannies walked over with a shocked Rudy in her arms, pouting discontentedly, and then looked at Suno in astonishment. At just 1 year old, he can make the attack he just did. Little Suno's swordsmanship talent is the strongest he has ever seen. Maybe little Suno can become the sword saint in the future. Aha! After all, he is the man who wants to be my thigh. How can it not be strong? Rudius had a smile on his face. Sannies lowered her head again and looked at the child in her arms, full of anticipation. If only Rudy could have half of little Suno's talent. Rudius. Is this the other world version of someone else's child? I suddenly feel that my thighs are not as fragrant anymore. Qingming outing and happy reading. Charge 100 and get 500 VIP coupons. Immediate recharge, activity period. April 4th to April 6th. 5. The 3 Legendary Swordsmanship. You are listening at novelfull.audio. At this moment, the maid Lilia also walked over and pulled Suno up, frowning. Surprisingly, it got so dirty. Go upstairs and change your clothes, I'll help you wash them. Suno nodded, perhaps because her body had shrunk and now Lilia was raising her. When facing her, there was always a feeling of facing her mother. Similarly, this feeling is also the same for Sannies, because even now I occasionally rub against her milk to drink. Looking at Suno's departure, Lilia lowered her head and apologized to Paul. This child has caused trouble for the master. How could that be? This child's swordsmanship talent is really amazing, and on the contrary, I don't have the confidence to be the child's master myself. Paul shook his head and sighed, but the joy in his expression could not be hidden. Originally just playing around with nothing to do, I unexpectedly discovered an apprentice of a swordsmanship genius. Lilia's mouth curved in a joyful curve. When Suno, who had changed into clean clothes, came down again, Paul, who had just become a teacher with great enthusiasm, began to show off his knowledge. Suno, do you know what move I just taught you? Paul propped up his chest, looking proud to ask me questions. He is indeed an old child. Master, what is it? Suno asked in a milky voice, which was very cooperative. Sword God Flow, one of the 3 major swordsmanship schools. Sure enough. Just like the appearance of the skill, although I personally experienced the characteristics of Sword God Flow just now, it would be even better if Paul could explain it himself. Under Suno's curious gaze, Paul waved and called his son Rudy over. Rudy, come and listen to the class too. Paul doesn't want his own son to fall too far behind as an apprentice. Rudy reluctantly walked over slowly, and as time passed, he also showed his superiority over ordinary babies. Not only can it walk on the ground faster than an average baby, but language learning may not be as effective as Suno's ability to communicate effectively, but it can also express oneself with unclear speech. And most of the time, my personality is relatively quiet. Although there may be strange situations where I am buried in my mother's arms and don't want to come out, in the eyes of Sannies and others, it is just a child's coquettishness and nothing. In Paul's eyes, his Rudy is also a genius. If he trains well, is he another Suno? No, Paul wants Rudy to showcase a talent beyond Suno. Rudy looked in awe at Suno standing upright beside him. Half a year had passed since he made the decision to establish a good relationship with this super genius. But their relationship has not made much progress. Of course, the problem is not with Suno's gentle attitude, but with Rudy's inability to take the first step himself. In his previous life, he suffered a tragic bullying in school, which left Rudy with a serious psychological shadow. Friends of the same age are simply demons. They dare not talk at all. Although I have already made up my mind to hold on to the big shot's thigh and seek help, I still cannot take the first step to speak. Rudy is extremely angry about himself like this. Standing by Suno's side, gazing at the cheek that, although still just an ordinary baby, perfectly blend strength and cuteness, Rudy is ready to open his mouth and chat. Forget it, let's talk tomorrow. Tomorrow is definitely fine. Alas, it failed again. Whether in my previous life or in this life, I am indeed a waste. Even though I have been reincarnated and had a second life, I still haven't grown much. I have already decided to show my true abilities. Just as Rudy was regretting his self-disgust, he saw Suno beside him smiling at him. Rudy say hello in a milky but clear voice. Wow! Angels! Rudy immediately became excited and quickly greeted him, taking the first step of hugging the big shot's thigh. Suno nodded with a smile. After all, he was a fellow traveler from the same hometown, and experiencing the same experience can be considered as sharing the same illness. He didn't originally dislike Rudius very much, and now he still parasitizes the Graylat family. There is still a long time before he grows up to live independently, so there is no harm in building a good relationship with Rudius, who is half the owner. Cough. Then I'll start explaining the So. Called 3 major swordsmanship schools. Paul over there began to have a pleasant time with the 2 children and nodded in satisfaction, beginning his explanation. At the beginning of the conversation, Paul's expression became serious. First of all, Rudy and Suno, you should know that this world is not only inhabited by humans, but also by many terrifying other races. Isn't it just the human race, there are other terrifying races. Rudy was so shocked that he widened his eyes and glanced at Suno next to him. Surprisingly, there was no response. He should also know it for the first time, right? Is this the calmness of a genius? Sure enough, there is an absolute gap between geniuses and mortals in every aspect. According to Paul, in this world, human opponents are not only humans themselves, but also many more threatening entities. Demons, monsters, orcs, long-eared people. And so on. Especially monsters that are larger in size than humans, move rapidly, have hard scales that can resist swords, and even possess regenerative power. They have been terrifying beings that have posed a threat to human survival since ancient times. In order to survive in such a world, people without rare magical talents began to think about how to fight against powerful monsters with weak bodies. The answer found is the sword, and the swordsmanship developed based on this ideology is the sword god Flow. With overwhelming sword speed and attack power, all monsters can be eliminated with just one strike. This is sword god Flow. And precisely because sword god Flow was loved by most sword wielders for a period of time, it also gave birth to the water god Flow, which had a very different style from it. Unlike the sword god Flow, which emphasizes initiative, speed, and a one-hit kill strategy, the characteristic of water god Flow is counterattack. This is a swordsmanship that fully utilizes the opponent's strength, and no matter how weak the person using water god Flow is, there is a possibility of defeating the strong with weakness. Whether it is sword god Flow or water god Flow, there is a high possibility that factors such as physical ability and weapon performance may affect the outcome of battles. If you don't have a strong enough body, you can't learn swordsmanship. Unable to become a swordsman? No, there's no such reason. The swordsmanship developed with this philosophy is the northern divine flow. If there is no speed but strength, one should wear armor. If there is a tail, one should use it cleverly. If the scales are hard, one should use them in conjunction with a sword to fight. Relying on the sword, but not limited to it, using everything available to fight, even being called an acrobatic swordsman by humans doesn't matter. This is the northern divine flow. By the way, your master and father, I am proficient in the 3 major swordsmanship and have all reached a higher level. Paul pointed at himself with his thumb, looking proud. What does superior mean? Rudy looked puzzled and asked in an unclear voice. Qingming outing and happy reading. Charge 100 and get 500 VIP coupons. Immediate recharge, activity period. April 4th to April 6th. 6. Obtain 3 major swordsmanship skills. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Ah. Talking to children is tiring. Showing off his pride but not receiving a response, Paul sighed and began to explain. In this world, there are two professions. Magician and swordsman, and their levels are divided. According to Paul, this world, whether it is a wizard or a swordsman, can be divided into 7 levels. Junior, intermediate, superior, holy, king, emperor, divine. The superiors are already very powerful, and the holy level is even more precious and rare. The king level is already a respected figure for nobles, and the emperor level and god level are legendary beings. According to this statement, when a swordsmanship reaches a superior level, it can already surpass the vast majority of people. Paul, who has a superior level in all 3 swordsmanship, is indeed extraordinary in strength and can be proud. Wow! So, Master, you're amazing. I'll give you a little red flower. Looking at Paul, who understood my powerful expression, Suno cooperated and delivered the praise in a childish voice. Paul thought to himself, why don't you listen and say something nice? But this statement, when combined with Suno's childish and inexperienced face, did not reveal any other meaning. Cough. It's okay, isn't it? Paul, who spoke humbly, must have already risen to the sky if he had a tail. All right, the theoretical explanation has been completed, let's start practical learning. So on this day, Suno learned 3 major swordsmanship techniques. Sword God Flow, Water God Flow, and North God Flow, so let's first talk about the skills that Suno possesses. It has been almost a year since I crossed over and became a baby, and with the proficiency system I learned today, I have acquired multiple skills. Weak Dominance, LV1, 32418/100000 evolved from human language skills, capable of using language branches skills in matching animals and plants. To practice this skill, one should only do it when there is no one around. For infants, there is less time available for practice and there is not much improvement in proficiency. You can only gain around 100 proficiency points per day. Walking evolved once because it was used every day. The direction of evolution is speed. Shinsu, LV2. 21421/10000000. Just like the name suggests, after activating speed, it can immediately increase Suno's speed by 10 times. The duration is 15 minutes, at the cost of rapid exhaustion of physical strength. That is to say, this is a skill like a desperate trump card. It's countless times more powerful than walking before evolution. But it's difficult to evolve again. Suno looked at the $1 million starting proficiency and worried, even if he walked day and night non-stop, he could only achieve a proficiency of around 2000 at most. Not to mention sleeping on time at night. As a baby, he has no say in this area, and Lilia is very strict. But just during the day, you can only get around 1000 proficiency points per day. It takes about 1000 days to reach the million mark. That's 2.5 years. A Koan year. Evolution is really a long way off. Suno sighed, still looking forward to the continued evolution of this skill. It seems quite difficult to upgrade skills to the limit of LV3. Nevertheless, Suno still looks forward to the further evolution of his skills. Then there are 2 new skills that Suno has acquired in the past 6 months. 1000-mile eye and precise listening. 1000-mile eyes, this is a skill acquired from the eyes that look at things every day. The initial name was See, and 1000-mile eye refers to the evolved form of See. Qianlian, LV2. 132540/100000. As the name suggests, the effect of this skill is to be able to see a scene thousands of miles away when activated. For close combat, it is not very useful. Suno always feels that this skill is combined and the use of magic is great. Imagine using a 1000-mile eye to see an enemy thousands of miles away, and then using range magic to attack from the sky. you can snipe the enemy at a super long distance in an inexplicable situation. This outfit looks very handsome. However, according to memory, those who can use this level of magic seem to be holy level wizards. In the image, Rudi's water saint level graduation magic is capable of affecting the range of a city. This skill seems to be able to do very handsome things in the long run, but for Suno, who is still just a swordsman, it is very disappointing now. The only purpose is to see the scenery thousands of miles away. However, although the effect is not significant, obtaining proficiency is relatively easy. Just open your eyes and your proficiency will automatically increase. Because using the eyes is more common than walking, the speed at which the proficiency of Qianli increases is faster than that of Shinsu, with an average proficiency of 1,500 per day. It takes about 600 days to reach the top level of LV3. Accurate listening, LV2, 215236/100000. The last skill acquired in the past 6 months is an evolution from listening, which aims to give Suno the ability to listen to extremely subtle sounds around him. Whether it's the crawling of ants on the floor or the passionate nighttime pasting of Paul and Sanis in the neighboring room, when you activate this skill, you can clearly hear these sounds that should not have been heard so clearly. Because this skill seems to belong to the category of passive skills, there is no cost to activate it. Suno specifically activates it for some time every day to adapt to the small and noisy sounds. If he can open it all day long, filter out noise, and only hear what he wants to see, then his reaction time should be much faster than others during battles. Because the ears seem to work both day and night, the proficiency in precise listening increases the fastest among all skills. I can achieve a proficiency level of around 2,000 per day. It only takes over 400 days to upgrade again. Basically, Suno has been honing these skills for the past 6 months. There are also prompts for obtaining other skills along the way, but after inquiring with the system and learning about their effects, they still did not choose to obtain them. Instead of constantly acquiring unimpressive skills and becoming a situation where you have many skills but can all be useless, it's better to fully invest in improving existing skills. After all, human energy and time are limited. There aren't so many skills to possess, but each one is very powerful, which is a scene that Suno is more willing to see. Next are the 3 skills acquired today. Sword God Flow, LV2, 104/1000 Water God Flow, LV2, 115/1000 Bei Shenliu, LV2, 130/1000. I just got 1 level up. Perhaps it's because gaining experience in combat is faster. The next day, Paul, who had taken in a genius apprentice, was very excited. After breakfast early in the morning, he came to Suno and Rudi to begin his swordsmanship guidance. Sanis, who spent another night with Paul in the spring breeze last night, appeared radiant and warned. Darling, Rudi and Suno are still children. When practicing, pay attention to scale. I understand. Paul, who was originally planning to practice today, suddenly remembered that his student was just a 1-year-old baby with little physical development. No matter how talented he was, his physical hardware couldn't keep up. I can't afford the heavy training at all. Having been scolded by Sanis, Paul hung his head in disappointment. Suno. Master. I'm fine, you can just take action. Little Suno. At this moment, Paul only felt that the sound of milk and milk was the best sound in the world. Although I really want to put in all my effort to train you, what Sanis said is also true. If I used to exert too much force when I was a child, I wouldn't grow taller. Paul said this, changing the training plan he had set up last night. Today, let's focus on short-term practical exercises and theoretical explanations. The opponents of practical training are 2 1-year-old children, and theoretical explanations are even more uninteresting for Paul, who has always admired combat instincts. There's actually a risk of not growing too high. Suno shrunk his neck and wanted to train hard to evolve all 3 swordsmanship skills as soon as possible. Now let's change our strategy to focus on being steady and steady. After all, he doesn't want to become a handsome but short man when he grows up. How else are you looking for a wife? So, Rudy, you should come first today. In the courtyard, Paul stood in front of Suno and Rudy standing side by side and said this. Qingming outing and happy reading. Charge 100 and get 500 VIP coupons. Immediate recharge, activity period. April 4th to April 6th. 7. Suno Vs Paul. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Rudius was so nervous that he swallowed his saliva, but still followed the swordsmanship knowledge he learned yesterday and stumbled towards Paul with his wooden sword. Sword god flow. The milky voice had no aura at all. Watching this scene, Paul sighed slightly, feeling disappointed, and sighed inwardly about what he was actually doing. Spending time with two babies. The soft attack, as soon as it entered Paul's attack range, was immediately thrown away by a direct blow. The small wooden sword slipped out of his hand, and Rudy, who felt a tingling sensation in his palm, furrowed his brow. Tears are brewing in my eyes. Since his past life, he has been afraid of pain, and now this baby's body has no defense at all. The slight pain made him feel unbearable. Paul was a bit flustered and only breathed a sigh of relief after confirming that there was no thesis around him. Hey! Don't cry. I didn't use any force, did I? Rudy vigorously blew on his reddened palm. Paul sighed and remembered Suno's performance yesterday. His Rudy was still far behind. Xiao Suno, it's your turn. Paul is now tired of this battle with the baby, and the children are still too young. Perhaps they should start teaching swordsmanship again in a few years. Master, please advise. A milky but steady voice. Paul perked up a little and then saw a swift sword strike. Just like yesterday, we started with a fierce attack, with the goal still being Paul's thigh. This is the limit of Suno's attack distance. For him, it is almost impossible to defeat Paul without activating all skill cards. Even if all the skills were used, Suno only had the confidence to delay Paul for a period of time. There is no way, there is too much difference in physical fitness between adults and babies. So the purpose of the battle is simply to attack Paul's body and win. Oh, the speed has actually increased again. Paul defended himself with the flow of water, and a hint of shock flashed in his eyes. This guy has only been strong for a day. Has he become so much stronger again? Immediately excited. It's a bit interesting. The so-called teaching still needs to be like this. On the side, Rudius ignored his father's complaints and looked at Suno in the field with bright eyes. The sword that attacked the thigh was easily parried, but this time the wooden sword was not thrown away like yesterday. Paul. Well done. Come again. Proficiency +1, Proficiency +1, Suno is also very excited here, just like yesterday, his proficiency is rapidly increasing. 5 minutes later, this training ended with Suno's physical exhaustion once again. However, unlike when he played against Rudy before, Paul is very excited at this moment, and the match against Suno has given him a rare boost of energy. Surprisingly excited about a baby. This little guy is really extraordinary. In Paul's swordsmanship teaching, 2 years passed in a blink of an eye. In this scorching summer season, both Suno and Rudy have reached the age of 3. The Graylat family has not changed much from 2 years ago, it's just a courtyard with more flowers and plants. Paul, a strong brown-haired man wearing casual clothes, is fighting with a child wearing a white training suit. The boy has black hair and eyebrow-long bangs. The length of his temples on both sides has reached his round little ears, and he has tied a string behind his head to form a small ponytail. In terms of appearance, one cannot predict the future because they are still young, but their appearance at this moment is described by anyone as very cute and handsome. On one side of the courtyard, blonde Senis and maid Lilia, who had long wine-red hair, also watched attentively. Both of them, who looked only in their 20s, had beautiful looks that could be called beauties. Next to them were children with brown golden short hair, who had inherited their mother's beautiful appearance. The eldest son of the Graylat family was also the only child, Rudius. Rudy was eagerly watching the battle in the field with his large green pupils open. In the field, the head of Graylat's family, who was once the captain of a powerful adventurer team when he was young, was proficient in the three major swordsmanship of Sword God Flow, Water God Flow, and North God Flow, and all of them were practiced to the level of his superiors. Paul Graylat, who was already sweating profusely in this competition with his disciples. 2 years ago, he took in a wandering baby named Suno brought over by a maid as his apprentice, and since then he has started a daily uninterrupted training and teaching career. In daily training, Suno demonstrated a terrifying swordsmanship talent and combat instinct that could overturn Paul's worldview. At the beginning, the baby that Paul could defeat with just one hand was just used as training for post-meal exercise by Paul, and over time, it gradually no longer made him feel relaxed. After only a year, Suno forced Paul to exert all his strength in every battle to win. But recently, even if Paul used his tricks to suppress the situation, he could only achieve a narrow victory when facing his disciples. The still short body ahead held a wooden sword, and each strike was so fast that Paul's body was tense, and his eyes dared not even blink. If it weren't for the insufficient killing power of the wooden sword and the fact that the opponent was only a 3-year-old child with far less strength than an adult, Paul would have already raised his hand and surrendered. "Dad, come on. The dignity of the Graylat family depends entirely on you. Brother Suno, come on, let the boss who looks down on children taste the iron fist of justice. Dear, losing would be too embarrassing. You should know that little Suno is just a cute child." Sanis and Rudy both wanted to see Paul's joke, but Lilia hesitated whether to tell the child to pay attention to propriety. However, thinking that this might make the master's face worse, she gave up on the plan. It was already difficult enough to parry the swift swordsmanship, and Paul's son and wife, who looked forward to making a fool of themselves, made him even more anxious. In such a defensive game, as the head of the family and the teacher, the face will be in a mess. Faced with a swift sword strike towards the waist, use the Northern Divine Flow to block the attack. At the moment when Suno wanted to jump away, Paul's other hand quickly reached out and grabbed the wooden sword. Surprisingly, holding a sword in hand. This is despicable. Master. Faced with the accusation of his disciple, Paul, who had already taken the sword, said without blushing or jumping. The so-called swordsman means having the courage to fight without a sword. Didn't I teach you, Bei Shenliu? But now it's just normal practice, right? Do we need to use this method? Paul angrily said, "Stop talking. Practice is also combat. If it's combat, give it your all. Don't you lose combat power without a sword." "Apprentice, you're still far behind," Paul proudly raised his head. Suno. Qingming outing and happy reading. Charge 100 and get 500 VIP coupons. Immediate recharge, activity period. April 4th to April 6th. 8. Sword God Flow Mystery. Like Taidao. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The three of them shook their heads helplessly, feeling that using such a trick to defeat their disciple Paul was really embarrassing. However, Paul was forced to use such shameless tactics at this moment. The three of them have once again raised their awareness of Suno's strength. Suno sighed empty-handed and complained in a childish voice, "Master, you are also despicable. Stop talking nonsense, hurry up and attack." Paul sneered proudly, "This won't work, then I'll attack." Watching Paul confidently assume an attacking posture, Suno just shouted to the other side. "Rudy, help me choose a branch to come over." "Yes, big brother." Rudy nodded vigorously and ran towards a big tree in the corner of the courtyard, climbing up and breaking a branch from his arm. "Here, brother Suno. Hand it over respectfully like a dog's leg." Thank you, Rudy. Suno took the thank you and waved it casually a few times. Although the feel was not as good as that of a wooden knife, it was still barely usable. Relying solely on a fragile branch, you want to defeat me. Watch me break it with one sword. Paul looked at the apprentice waving his fingers and instinctively felt panic in his heart, but he still insisted on saying so. Suno just smiled, holding the bottom of the branch with both hands and facing Paul. Skill, Sword God Flowing Secret Light Tai Dao is activated. This is. Paul across from him felt the amazing momentum and widened his eyes in shock, feeling very uncomfortable. He had a premonition that the next blow would be very powerful, and he was afraid it would be difficult for him to take it. Thinking of taking the initiative to attack Shua, there was no movement yet, and a cold breath was already felt in the neck. Suno's branch had already lightly touched his neck at some point. That was so fast that everyone present couldn't catch a single moment with their naked eyes, like a teleportation speed. Looking at the young boy with black hair beside him, Paul opened his mouth in shock. I lost. Even though he had known that this day would come sooner or later, Paul still found it difficult to accept the moment when he truly lost to Suno. Beside them, the instant victory or defeat was also unbelievable to the three of them. There was a silence in the yard for a while, and Rudius began to congratulate first. Big brother. You're amazing. Rudy's face was full of joy, and the stronger brother Suno was, the more he could shine as his younger brother. The future life is a smooth journey. Paul just glanced at the rebellious son, just as he was about to seek comfort from his wife. Sannies had already rushed out excitedly and hugged Suno in her soft embrace. Little Suno, you're amazing. You easily defeated my dear Sannies. It's not as easy as you said. Paul's face was a bit uneasy as Lilia, a maid with beautiful wine-red hair, walked over and asked, Are you okay, sir? Paul shook his head and looked at the black-haired boy with a bitter smile on his face, trying to break free from Sannies' embrace. His expression was complex, and his mind was still filled with the blow that was so fast that he couldn't even see it. He has never taught Suno such a powerful technique, so the answer can only be realized by the other party themselves. At the age of only 3, he can master this level of swordsmanship. This child is really a monster. Even as he watched the monster grow day by day with his own eyes, Paul still felt incredulous. Xiao Suno. He let out a soft shout. Suno awkwardly broke free from Sannies' soft embrace. Perhaps in the eyes of Sannies, he was just a young child, but he believed that he was just a shrinking body and still a mature adult spiritually. In addition, he had also consumed Sannies' breast milk before, so he always felt awkward when facing Sannies. Master, Suno stood in front of Paul, feeling somewhat embarrassed. After all, he was the teacher who taught him for 2 years. Just now, he mercilessly talked about Paul's defeat in front of everyone. At this moment, the passion has passed, and he has some regrets. Will Paul, who has always been a chauvinist, hold a grudge against himself? The increase in strength cannot be concealed, and even if Paul's face is always taken into consideration to make him win, it is just a shame to his master. Moreover, in this foreign world, pretending to be a pig and eating a tiger has little effect. Showing one's talent and strength early is the only way to strive for more resources and status for oneself. After all, there are still many powerful players in this world, and Paul only has a moderate level of strength. Defeating him is not something to be proud of. It's better to say that because it is a hypothetical enemy with experts at the level of 7 major powers, this level of strength cannot even be considered as having self-protection level strength. Not to the extent of being complacent. On this side, Paul did not know Suno's thoughts, and he was completely convinced by the demon's disciple. Well done. Across from him, tall Paul just smiled brightly and slightly bent over to rub his disciple's black hair. Suno breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that Paul had already let go. The other 3 people present also breathed a sigh of relief when they saw Paul's smile. Xiao Suno. Paul looked straight at Suno, who also looked up at him. At the age of 3, he cultivated all 3 major swordsmanship skills above his superiors and self-realized his unique skills. Paul said, "In swordsmanship, you are the most outstanding genius I have ever seen. I have nowhere else to teach you." Paul smiled and said to Suno, "Congratulations on your graduation. Qingming outing and happy reading. Charge 100 and get 500 VIP coupons. Immediate recharge, activity period. April 4th to April 6th. 9. Suno. I love magic. You are listening at novel.full.audio. In the evening, to celebrate Suno's graduation from swordsmanship, the Graylat family held a small family banquet. The banquet is over, in the room of Paul and Senis. That guy just graduated like this. On the bed, Paul hugged Senis with a sigh on his face. It's really unbelievable. Sani said, "Darling, didn't you put water in today?" "I have put in all my strength, and his swordsmanship has indeed surpassed mine." "Is it really fake?" Sanis was shocked. She knew her dear strength, and if she used her true abilities, she wouldn't lose to a child. "I didn't expect that it was really not Suno's opponent anymore. I also hope this is fake." Paul shook his head with a bitter smile and murmured, "Should we hire another teacher for him?" Several familiar and suitable candidates suddenly appeared in his mind. For this little apprentice who unexpectedly left his family, Paul is now very precious. He was like watching Suno grow up like this until the moment when Yiming shocked the world. On the other side, in Suno's room, after washing up, he also lay in bed and entered a resting state. In this world of entertainment scarcity without a computer or internet, there is nothing else to do at night if it weren't for close combat in bed like Paul and Denise. As a child, even though Suno had the idea of finding a woman to post when he was lonely, unfortunately, the hardware features were not yet complete and could only be imagined. Usually at night, when unable to sleep, Suno will start to improve his skill proficiency. Due to environmental limitations, the only project that can be carried out is the skill of precise listening. After 2 years of continuous training, this skill has also reached LV3 like other skills. Not only has the range of control increased significantly compared to before, but the surrounding sounds that can be heard have also become more subtle. For example, at this moment, as soon as Suno activated his skills, he heard the faint snoring of Rudy in the neighboring room, the subtle sound of Lilia sewing clothes, and the sound of couples applauding for love like fans next door. Oh my, I forgot. It seems like today is another day for the couple to do business. The sound is much more lively than last time, and it seems that Paul, who has been accumulating for many days, is particularly excited. Damn it, being young is good. Suno sighed, as if he was a bit too young. In the blink of an eye, another week passed, and in the struggle between his disciples, Paul, who found it increasingly difficult to gain an advantage, completely accepted his fate. Accepted that he was no longer a match for Suno. And another thing that happened at this time was that his somewhat depressed mood improved a bit. My son Rudy, who is the same age as Suno and is 3 years old, showed amazing magical talent one afternoon. Surprisingly, a water bomb completely shattered the wall on the second floor. This discovery shocked the Graylat family. Thanis looked at the broken wall in surprise for a while, not angry. Instead, she smiled and clapped her hands. "Darling, is Rudy a magical genius?" Paul was also surprised and said, "Rudy, did you really do this?" And little Do-Ding Rudy looked at his palm in surprise. He had been practicing with Suno the moves from the magic book he had found at home before, but he didn't expect to actually succeed. And it also caused such great damage. However, although there was no hint of blame on Paul's face, he still shook his head with a hint of guilt and said, "This was done by Suno. I only have that little." Rudy finished speaking in a childish voice, pointed with his hand, and next to it was a much smaller hole on the shattered wall. Previously, the two of them practiced launching water bomb magic together, but unexpectedly caused such damage. "Rudy, you're such a dog. How dare you betray the boss?" Suno took a few steps back, feeling a bit guilty, thinking that this guy is really unreliable. Paul glanced at Suno and didn't expect that this guy was a rare swordsmanship genius for thousands of years. Besides, he also had a talent for magic. Paul glanced over and the surprise on his face still lingered. It was much smaller than Suno's, but for a child of this age, it was already unbelievable. This level of destructive power is also at the level of some novice adventurers. But this was only caused by 2 3-year-old children, and Paul would not have believed it if he hadn't seen it with his own eyes. "I see, Rudy, who has always been far behind Suno, is he actually a genius?" Paul thought to himself with excitement. "Dear. Please hire them a private tutor." Thawnes clapped her palm and proposed this proposal. "Okay." Paul immediately agreed not to delay the growth of these two good seedlings. Once he made a decision, Paul immediately went to the city to post a notice looking for a magic teacher. Soon, the well-paid notice was taken away by a poor blue-haired girl wearing a black magic hat. On the eve of the arrival of the magic teacher, after finishing dinner at the Graylat family, Paul called out Suno. Lilia, who had already started tidying up the utensils, looked over there with concern. She had always been particularly concerned about the gifted child she had picked up. "It's okay." Sannes gave her a reassuring look. Outside, in the courtyard of the Graylat family illuminated only by the dim moonlight, Paul looked solemnly at the puzzled black-haired child in front of him. "Xiao Suno, for the last time, are you sure you don't want me to send you to a place more suitable for your swordsmanship practice? You know, as a teacher, I have nothing else to teach you." During this period, Paul, who had truly experienced Suno's strength and talent, knew he was no longer qualified to become his master. In order to help the child continue to grow strong, he proposed the idea of hiring another swordsman teacher far stronger than himself for Suno or sending Suno to the holy land of swordsmen with many legends. Paul believed that the only place where this child should stay was in a place where there were all sword lunatics and legendary sword gods. Paul told Suno about this idea, but it was unexpectedly rejected. "Sword Holy Land? No. I don't want to leave Aunt Lilia." Rejected in a rather childish manner. "Then let Lilia go with you." "I don't want to leave here." No matter how Paul tried to persuade him, Suno just didn't agree, and this matter came to a standstill. And today, as the new teacher is about to arrive, Paul, who didn't want to delay this swordsmanship prodigy, asked this question again, and Suno's response was a big smile, saying in a milky voice, "No problem, master. I love magic." "Paul. What? You like hammer magic?" Looking at the disappointed figure of Paul leaving, Suno curled his lips. The previous words he didn't want to leave Lilia were just excuses. Although he did have some gratitude towards Lilia, who saved his life and took good care of himself, it was only limited to that. "We haven't reached the point where we can't do without her yet. The reason why I want to stay in the Graylat family is that my own strength is not very strong yet. Although I can easily defeat Paul, I should not be a very powerful presence in the legendary land of Sword Holy Land. Once you enter there, you will face the annoying situation where many people can kill you at any time. Unless absolutely necessary, Suno would not let himself fall into that situation. In the Graylat family, although the cultivation of swordsmanship has temporarily reached a bottleneck, there is still magic in this world. Although Paul considered himself a natural swordsman, he may become a legendary swordsman in the future. But Suno will not set limits on himself, his interest in magic is more focused on swordsmanship. That is to say, both hands must be grasped and both hands must be hard. Moreover, he knows his own affairs and his cultivation method is different from that of ordinary people. Going to the Holy Land of Swords may not be suitable for oneself. Okay, the above reasons are actually nonsense. For Suno, the most important thing is that he has not yet met Sylphy and Loki, and has established a good bond with them. It wouldn't be good if Rudy had made any preemptive behavior during his departure. Fire and theft prevention, little brother. Let's focus on cultivating magic and establishing a friendly relationship with Loki in the coming days. Qingming outing and happy reading. Charge 100 and get 500 VIP coupons. Immediate recharge, activity period. April 4th to April 6th. 10. Magic assessment and shocked to the point of breaking Loki. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The next day, early in the morning. As a young sorcerer of the Migler tribe, Loki Miglerdia knocked on the door of the Graylat family. Paul and Sannies immediately came out to welcome the young girl with blue hair and blue pupils in front of them, looking somewhat puzzled. From her petite appearance, it gives people a feeling of being young and weak, making people wonder whether she has reached adulthood. Are you teacher Luo Qixi? It looks like a 14-year-old girl, but the actual age is already 30.7 years old. Legitimate Loli, who has rich adventurer experience, coldly asks. Yes. What's wrong? You look. Paul and Sanus looked at each other in surprise, and Rudius, who was in Sanus's arms, added appropriately. You look very small. Luo Qixi glared at him in dissatisfaction and said, You have no right to say such things. Also. May I ask what students I want to teach? Luo Qixi looked back and forth at these people in confusion, but did not see any students of appropriate age. There were only 2 children like little pudding. Sannies proudly pointed to Rudy and Suno, it's just the 2 of them. Rudy and little Suno are rare magical geniuses in my family. Rudius, who was held in the arms of Sanus, mischievously blinked his eyes, while Suno stood quietly to the side and said hello. Teacher Luo Qixi, welcome your arrival. Yes, thank you. Loki replied to the polite black-haired boy with a smile. Then he looked at Paul and Sanus speechlessly, sighed deeply, and muttered softly, Indeed. There are foolish parents whose children are just a little smarter and love to fantasize. Ha! Teacher Loki, what are you talking about? Sannies tilted her head. It's nothing. Anyway, let's test their magic level first. Loki shook her head quickly, her blue braid swaying gently. Although Luo Qixi said so, he actually didn't believe in any decent magic that these 2 little puddings, who probably didn't even know a word, could do. If it weren't for her financial difficulties, she wouldn't be willing to accept children of this age as students. Anyway, let's temporarily receive 1 month's salary before considering resigning. Alright, let's take a look at your level of mastery of magic first. I'll demonstrate it once. In the courtyard, Luo Qixi read the magic book that Rudy and Suno used to learn for a while, then threw away the book, opened his tender white palm, and aimed at the only big tree in the corner to start the teaching demonstration. May the great protection of water come to the place you are seeking, and the coolness of the shallow flow manifest here. Water ball, the blue-haired ponytail girl began singing. While singing, the basketball-sized crystal-clear water ball began to gather in front of the palm of the hand. Then, the water ball flew towards the tree at a very fast speed. With a bang. The tree in the corner started to break from the middle. How about it, can it be done? Luo Qixi tilted her pretty face slightly and looked at her 2 little doubting disciples. Teacher, actually that's a tree that my mother cherishes very much. She waters it every day. Ha! The pride on Loki's face stagnated. She looked at Suno and asked anxiously. Really or not? Really. Suno nodded, feeling a little embarrassed. Seeing Loki Shiguang remember being happy, he forgot to remind her that there was still such a thing going on. But this is also her fault for having a mischievous personality. Luo Qixi was completely panicked, and her fair and smooth forehead was covered in cold sweat. Quickly ran to the corner of the courtyard, crouched down in front of the broken tree, and began chanting and using healing techniques. Suno came to her side and carefully observed her movements and spells. Ding! Obtain the skill healing spell. As expected, there is another skill added, and it is also a precious healing magic. Suno's joyful eyebrows relaxed, while Loki successfully used the healing tree to restore the big tree through her efforts. Looking at the big tree in front of him, which was exactly the same as before, Luo Qixi breathed a sigh of relief, wiped the cold sweat on his forehead, and turned to look at his two disciples. There was a small accident just now, but it's okay now. Do you remember my spell just now? No problem, I have already remembered. Rudy glanced at Suno and the two children answered in unison. Luo Qixi nodded calmly and said, okay, let's demonstrate it once. Let's start with you, Rudius. Luo Qixi raised her tender and watery fingers and pointed at Rudy. Yes. Rudy nodded and stood in the position before Loki. The scholar raised her hand in her posture, desperately recalling the spell Loki had just recited in her mind. I can't remember too much. So why not just skip the chant? The water droplets condensed in the center of the boy's palm, quickly forming a water ball no smaller than Loki's. Bang! The water ball swept through an arc and perfectly hit the big tree in the corner. The big tree tilted its neck and fell. Teacher, how's it going? Rudy proudly forgot about the past. Although his magic was far inferior to the boss of the demon genius, it should not be too bad either. Luo Qixi looked at the little boy in front of him with complex eyes and said, Rudius. Did you omit the chant just now? Rudius tilted his head in confusion and said. Using magic requires singing. Rudy felt a bit embarrassed. When he was practicing with the boss, he had never heard of singing magic before. Have you been using magic incorrectly before? Hee. Actually never singing. Loki felt like she was broken. Surprisingly, I met a magical genius who could skip singing in such a small mountain village. Her pride, which had just been upgraded to water saint level magic, was a bit worn out. After a while, she finally cleared up her emotions and looked at another black-haired boy who had given her a good impression before, smiling and saying. Your name is Suno, right? You should try it too. Qingming outing and happy reading. Charge 100 and get 500 VIP coupons. Immediate recharge, activity period. April 4th to April 6th.